All right. So a lot of folks these days are worried about the fact that LSAT test a lot of folks these days are worried that LSAT test registrations are up significantly year over year when we look at October LSAT test taker numbers. Last year there were about 22,800 people registered for the October LSAT. This year there are over 35,000 people registered for the October LSAT. That is more than a 50% year over year increase. And so people are thinking, why are so many students out there taking the October LSAT? Are LSAT test taker numbers really that up year over year? Are applicant numbers really up that far year over year? The answer is, in a strange way, yes and no. Yes, there are far more people signed up for the LSAT this year than last. There are far more people applying to law school this year than last. But it is not a true 50% year over year increase. Why? Because although there are far more people, 12, 13,000 more signed up for October this year over last year, a lot of them are going to unregister from the October LSAT once September LSAT registrations drop. In other words, when September LSAT scores come out next week on Wednesday, a lot of folks who were signed up for October will choose not to take it. We saw the same thing in August of this year as well as September of this year. It looked like there was some massive spike in people who were going to take the August and September LSATs. But as those test dates actually approached, the number of students signed up for those exams dropped off precipitously. A lot of people push back their test dates to a later date. A lot of people withdraw from those LSATs altogether because they hit their goal and they decide they don't need to actually take that LSAT in the future after all. And so the numbers that you see on LSAC's website are inflated. In short, they are not a realistic depiction of the number that will actually end up taking that official exam. I put the link here in the chat to LSAC's website where you can actually see how many people are registered supposedly, but that does not reflect what you'll actually be seeing on test day itself. So in short, don't stress about that. Now, this is going to be an open Q&A, anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat or join me live on the stream. I'll be happy to help out as many of you as I possibly can over the course of this call. And I do want to help out as many folks as I can. That's what I'm here for. That's what I love to do. I know that the LSAT prep process and law school admissions can be stressful and difficult. And so I'm looking to help out as many folks as I possibly can with the process. That's why I do these live streams, why I do these Q&As. If you want to connect with me more in depth, more long form, I'm offering free one-on-one LSAT tutoring lessons at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is in my bio on Instagram. The link is in the description below this video on YouTube. And I'm here to help out as many folks as I can. Got a question here from Priya, who's currently at a 168 looking for 174. And by the way, folks, as you ask your questions, the more context you can give me, the better. Let me know your current score, your goal score for test day, and if you can, when you are taking the LSAT. All of that context is really useful in order to allow me to better serve you, to better guide you. I see Ashley Elise is taking November. Awesome. Great, Ashley. Drop in the chat what you're currently scoring and what your goal score is, any weak areas or pain points, and I'll do my best to guide you. In the meantime, while you jot that down, I'm going to get to this question here from Priya. Priya saying, I'm consistently missing 2 to 3 questions in reading comp, no matter what passage type it is. Is it worth trying new strategies this late, or should I double down on what I've been doing? I'm taking it in October. So you've got about 3 weeks till your test in October. You're looking to go up 6 points from 168 to 174. And while that's only 6 points, that's a harder 6 points to achieve. It's a lot easier to go from, say, a 148 to a 154 than from a 168 to a 174. You're missing 2 to 3 questions on reading comp. Should you try out a new strategy? Yeah, you're missing 2 to 3 in reading comp, but you're also probably missing 2 to 3 in each of your logical reasoning sections. Would that be fair to say? I'm just doing the math here based on what you left out. So can you just confirm for me that that's what's going on in logical reasoning? Because if it is, and presumably it is, because if you're at a 168, you're missing probably 10 questions or so. The thing is that Yeah, it is. Okay. So any questions you miss in logical reasoning, any gains you can make in logical reasoning, all of that is doubled because there are 2 sections of logical reasoning and only 1 section of reading comprehension. So what's going to give you more bang for your buck, focusing on reading comp or focusing on logical reasoning? I'm not saying to double down on what you've been doing, because what you've been doing has gotten you to where you're at right now, which is a 168. And we got to get you your 6 points. That's probably going to come more from logical reasoning than from reading comp, just because the gains you make in logical reasoning will compound across the 2 sections. And you're probably, if you're at a 168, you're not missing questions because of the question stem type. In other words, you know what a strengthened question is, you know what a weakened question is. You're getting hard questions wrong because they're hard. And so for that reason, I would say we've got to look at the method of reasoning in the arguments where you're having trouble. We've also got to look at the tempting wrong answers you're most prone to falling for, and the unappealing right answers that you're most prone to being discouraged away from. You have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And until you can drill down to the root cause of what you're missing and why, you may end up just making the same mistake again. And that's what we want to help you avoid. But logical reasoning is probably where the biggest gains will come from. It's going to come from your review process of those tough questions. And this is really the sort of thing where personalized advice matters the most. Because at this stage, I mean, the wrong adjustment, the wrong approach can actually hurt you more than it helps. And we don't want to do something that would be counterproductive for your situation. And in the tutoring, we tailor the approach exactly to you and your situation beyond the context I can give you right now. And so book a call with me, unpluggedprep.com/start, and we could talk through it privately. We'll block off 30 minutes. We'll go over a logical reasoning question together. We'll look at how you approach it. We'll look at any weak areas in your approach and your learning style and tailor the recommendations accordingly. Now, Ashley, did you have any additional context you could share on your situation in your prep for November? In the meantime, as Ashley's typing, if she's still here, I'm going to move on to the next question I have from YouTube here. Daniel's currently at a 160, looking for 172, about 5 months or so till the LSAT. He says, I've got time until February, but I'm struggling with endurance. After the 3rd section, my accuracy drops. What's the best way to build stamina without burning out? Really common issue. I mean, you've got 5 months to work on just endurance. I'm not sure that endurance is the only thing that you need to work on when you're at a 160. You're looking for at least 12 points. Endurance comes later in the process. And with 5 months, I would say, let's look at your weak areas. Maybe there's a particular question type in logical reasoning. Maybe there's an adjustment we could make to your reading comp approach. We nail down and address those weak areas first. And then later, we train your endurance like an athlete trains. But first, we work on your form to make sure your form is solid so we're not training or building bad habits. So we look at your analytics, we look at your practice test results and see, are there certain commonalities in areas that you're consistently having trouble with? And then we drill those areas. We have a LASER approach to LSAT prep that we use. LASER is an acronym standing for learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. And it's the backbone of the personalized study plans that we create for all of our students. And so we build out a study plan for you, targeting your weak areas, considering the 5-month time frame. First, we work you through foundational material. Then we have you drill questions by type. Then we have you do individual sections to work on your pacing. And then we build your endurance. So in other words, Daniel, don't run before you can walk. Is this all making sense? Is this clicking for you? Endurance will come, right? Yeah, okay, because endurance will come. You're going to take ideally at least 10, 20, even 30 exams because you've got the time to do so. You could do 2 exams a week for the next 4 months, meaning you take 1 month to build your foundation, drill your weak areas, and then you just do exams. And if your accuracy is dropping at after the third section into the 4th because you're fatigued, we just have you do more sittings of full exams. We have you do 1 section, Then we have you do 2 sections back to back. Then we have you do 2 sections, take the 10-minute break, then do 1 more section. And then we have you do 4 sections. We build your endurance gradually to the point that test day itself will feel like just another run through because you'll have done it all before. And folks, I see you. If you have questions, just drop them in the chat and I'll address your question as I finish out the other ones I'm covering. I'll get to as many as I can. I'll stay on to answer every question that comes through or until I have to go for lunch, whichever comes first. So keep dropping the questions in. And so we'll build out your study plan, Daniel. We'll build up to endurance. And then, of course, we'll walk you through that process step by step in your study plan. We'll cover it live in coaching to address any weak areas in your process to help you with review as well. And so we'll talk through this more later. If you haven't already, you could book your free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. That's open to everybody, by the way, unpluggedprep.com/start. Yes, it is really free. Yes, I'm really opening this up to the world. Maybe I'm crazy for doing this, but I just love talking with students in real life. And, and I've been making these videos on YouTube and Instagram and elsewhere for the past 7 years, essentially. And it's a lot more fun for me to actually just talk to people live than to sit down solo talking to a camera and just thinking about what should I say today versus just helping real people with the problems they're facing. And so I really do just want to help out students and talk through these questions. So keep dropping them in the chat as they come up. And ideally, please share with me when you're taking the LSAT, if you have a target test date in mind, your current score, where you're currently scoring if you've taken a practice test, your goal score for test day, and that any weak areas that you're facing, and then I can better tailor the advice to you and your situation. And folks on LinkedIn, by the way, I apologize, just due to the software, I'm not able to see your questions live. I'll see them afterwards, but if you can come on over to YouTube or Instagram, I'll be able to see them in real time. And if you don't have time to chat now or you want to talk more privately, you can book a free call with me, unpluggedprep.com/start. So yeah, keep those questions coming. I've got one here from Maria. I'm already hitting 170, but my score swings a lot, sometimes 167, sometimes 173. How can I make my score more consistent on test day? I'm taking it in October. I actually don't think you have a problem, Maria. Score fluctuations are normal. I've actually never met a student whose scores didn't fluctuate. And LSAC themselves admits this. They have what they call a score band in psychometrics. Psychometrics is the study of standardized tests, basically a lot of data analysis, a lot of people who are really good at statistics. And what they find is that if a student has the aptitude or ability to score a 170, that doesn't mean they will always get a 170 on every single practice test. Some tests will play to your strengths more than others, and some days your brain power is sharper, you slept better, you ate better, you're feeling more focused. And so on those better days, you might score above your aptitude of 170 and you get lucky, hit a 173. Other days you're tired or you're fatigued or a question threw you off and you score below your true ability and you hit only a 167. The score band or margin of error is 3.5 points on each end. And for that reason, if you took it in October, Maria, as you're planning, and you hit a 170, that's the score you deserved. You hit it on the nose. Good. But maybe you want to do better. You're saying you want a 175. Okay, we'll get to that too. But you might get lucky on test day, even with your current abilities, and hit a 173. And that's great. And maybe you score worse and hit a 167, in which case you should retake, because maybe you'll get lucky and do better. And then with additional time, maybe you'll improve even more, of course. So for that reason, I recommend that every single student retake the LSAT at least once, meaning you take it officially at least twice, because maybe you'll get lucky and score on the high end. And if you don't, no big deal, because law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores, but rather they only take the highest score. Now, as for raising your baseline to hit your true goal of 175, of course, that's a different story. And it's going to come down to deepening and refining your review process. I mean, in a certain sense, there's this, you could call this a classic case of inconsistency under pressure, but I think that would not be a fair assessment because of the natural fluctuations. But there are specific frameworks we can walk you through to both close the gap or narrow the fluctuations and also raise your baseline so that you can truly lock in your score. We have a framework that we use with students live in coaching called the Socratic review method to help you get more out of your review process, meaning that we look into exactly where your misunderstanding is stemming from. Is it in misreading the argument? Is it misreading the question stem? Or is it being tempted by an especially appealing wrong answer choice or a discouraging right answer? In other words, you have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And until you can get down to the root cause of exactly what you're getting wrong and why, you may end up just making the same mistake again. And that's normal. That's natural. It's that you're not getting questions wrong because of the question stem type. Because at this point, when you're already averaging 170, you're pretty solid with how to strengthen an argument or how to weaken an argument, for example. We've just got to deepen your understanding of the methods of reasoning and the tricks and traps that you're falling for so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again. That's ultimately what this is all about. And folks just coming in, by the way, this is an open Q&A. I'm addressing all questions, LSAT and law school admissions. I'll stay on for as long as I can. When you share your question, please let me know your target test date if you have one, whether it's October, November, January, February, what you're currently scoring if you've taken a practice test, what your goal score is for test day, and any particular weak areas that you're struggling with. And as for the title of this live stream, I got sidetracked by the Q&A. I know that I was opening this up by talking about why LSAT registrations are up so much and what you can do about that for your situation. And I talked about how LSAT registrations will drop when September LSAT scores come back next week. The people who were considering October will drop their registration and those numbers will drop significantly. We won't actually see 36,000 people taking it in October. The increase will not be 50%. It'll be closer to maybe 20% year over year when all is said and done. But there is the question, of course, why are law school applications up 20%? Why are LSAT taker numbers up roughly the same? And there's a confluence of factors. There's a combination of different reasons, kind of like there's no one reason for the fall of the Roman Empire, right? It's a combination of different things that in tandem or in conjunction led to a decline, or in this case, we're seeing an increase in applications. And so the number one reason, of course, is that the job market is not so great. There are many recent college grads, especially those who majored in the humanities, who are having difficulty finding a job worth taking on. And so the underemployment and stagnant wages are pushing people to seek out better career options. And part of that is making the choice to go to law school, right? It's an escape hatch. It's a way to improve your earning power and wait out the bad economy. This is called a counter-cyclical behavior. Basically, when the economy is bad, applications to grad school increase. We saw this back in 2008 during the financial crisis. I was actually teaching the LSAT back then also. I've been doing this since 2005. So I actually saw this happen a couple of years into my career where basically law school applications skyrocketed because when the economy is bad, it's like, well, should I look for a job? Should I keep working as a paralegal or looking for a paralegal job? Or should I just go to law school, wait this out, and hopefully 3 years from now, the economy is better. Now I'll have a JD and I'll have higher earning power. And so that is probably the number one reason that we see more people going to law school. We saw this in 2008. We saw it again in 2020 with the pandemic and the recession. We're seeing it again now. We've also got the fact that LSAC removed the logic game section about a year ago. And the logic game section was universally the most hated, feared, scary part of the exam. Law school applicants, pre-laws, are typically not very math inclined, and logic games seemed kind of mathematical. So people didn't want to take the LSAT, and they were discouraged and just kind of kept pushing it off. Now they're coming back because logic games is no longer there. We've only got logical reasoning and reading comp. And so it's less material to study. And the scariest part of the exam no longer being there, I mean, it lowers that psychological barrier to entry, and it brings many applicants or would-be applicants back into that law school pipeline. This is also a reason, by the way, that LSAT scores are rising. We have what's called LSAT score inflation, where not only do you have more people taking the LSAT, but also more people taking it and getting higher scores. Even if law school applicants are up 20% year over year, the number of people in the highest score bands of 170 to 174, 175 to 180, those are up sometimes more than 30% year over year. And it's because it's easier to get a high score when you've got less material that you need to study. You also have, of course, the fact that it's gotten easier and easier to get accommodations for extra time on the LSAT. LSAT used to be really strict about this, and they were denying accommodations to those who truly deserved them. And they got sued several times under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And as a result of that, we've seen a spike in LSAT granting out accommodations. And so with extra time, whether it's time and a half or double time or taking it on paper or having the extra experimental section dropped from your exam, it's easier to get a high score. And so that's yet another big reason for LSAT score inflation. Now to bring it back to why LSAT taker numbers are up, I think one big reason that people don't talk about enough is that people are retaking the LSAT more and more than ever before. It used to be that you could only take the LSAT 4 times per year: February, June, September, or October, and then December. 4 times a year, 4 at-bats. Now, they've doubled that. You could take it 8 times a year. I mean, for example, this fall, we've had August and September already. We also have October and November. So there are 4 consecutive LSAT administrations in 4 consecutive months. So if you take my earlier advice where I say to everybody, take it at least twice because through luck alone, you might do better. There's people who are taking that advice and taking it in both August and September, or both September and October, or both October and November, whatever. It's totally fine. Law schools don't care because they have no incentive to care. Because law schools are only evaluated based on the highest LSAT score of the students who choose to go to their school. And so if you took it cold officially, bad idea, but people do it, and you got a 150, then you were like, oh man, that was a mistake. I've got to actually study for this thing. Who would have thought? You take it after studying significantly and you get a 170. So you have both a 150 cold and a 170 post studying. You are a 170 scoring applicant. Law schools will look at you the same as someone who only took it once and got a 170. They'll see the other score, but they're not going to care because this is who you are today, and this is your highest score on record, and this is what is reported to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where U.S. News gets their data for the U.S. News Law School rankings, which everyone cares a great deal about because they just do, because that's what everyone looks at. Everyone else looks at it, so they look at it too. That dictates prestige. It dictates law schools giving out merit scholarships. And so it's well worth it for you to care as well. Because if you can apply with an LSAT score above your target school's median, they will give you scholarship money because they have incentive to, because it will raise their status in the rankings. It's kind of circular, but that doesn't mean people don't do it because people are irrational. What you should also look at, of course, are employment outcomes and bar passage rates. But scholarship money matters, right? I mean, if you can avoid $200,000 in debt by getting a higher LSAT score, it's a pretty good trade for studying for the LSAT for just a couple months, even as a part-time job or hobby. I mean, if you treated this like a 6-credit class in college, then you put in maybe 5-10 hours a week for 3 or 4 months, that could be enough to get you to your goal. Of course, some people study more, and I think you should, because your LSAT score weighs more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA combined. Think about it. A single 2.5-hour exam matters more than all 4 years of undergrad and 130 credits or whatever it is at your school. So don't you think it's more important than a 6-credit class? I do. I mean, I think it's, if you, let's say some people graduate college a semester early, You could then take your entire spring semester that you would have spent in college, but is post-graduation, just take 4 months and study for the LSAT full time. If you're lucky enough to have someone supporting you, of course, not everybody does. But if you do, if you are fortunate enough to be in that position, I would take full advantage of it rather than taking some low wage entry level job if you don't have to. And if you do, of course, we can carve out a study plan around that to leverage your evenings and weekends, maybe an hour before work, an hour during lunch. You can do that too. There are ways to find 2 to 3 hours a day. I mean, if you look at your phone and you look at the screen time app that calculates how many minutes you looked at your phone for, you might find an hour a day. And if you just put your phone on airplane mode and didn't do all the things that you do, you'd have an hour more to study. And you put the phone aside, you open up Law Hub, you open up your course, you book a weekly coaching session or something. And by the way, I'm actually offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to anybody who comes across this, literally. You go to the link in my bio on Instagram, you go to my description below the YouTube video, unpluggedprep.com/start. And I will meet with as many of you as I can privately one-on-one to help you through whatever your struggles are. Because I want to help you succeed. I want to help you rock this exam. And that's what I'm here to do. And last bit on the surgeon applicants, the other factor that feels kind of distant, but I think is still real, is that we're still kind of feeling out the last waves of the so-called Trump bump from last year. Basically, during presidential election years, especially when Trump is running for office, people get more politically minded. They want to go to law school and change the system. And so they want to make a difference. And a JD is one way to do that. And so they apply to law school to be part of the change. Last year, we saw a 20% jump in law school applicants year over year. Early data is saying we're going to see another 20% increase year over year, believe it or not. And the fact that we have all these high LSAT registrant numbers is a strong early indicator that the trend will continue this cycle as well, which means we're going to see more people applying, more people with high LSAT scores. And it's not going to be 50% year over year, but it's still going to be a surge. And the way that you deal with that is by raising your own targets. You raise your own LSAT score goals. And so if you were thinking of aiming for a 170 because that's your target school's LSAT median, I would say, well, that was their median for last year's students. This year, it might be higher. And so if a 170 got you in last year, maybe this year you want to aim for at least a 172, 173. And when you consider on top of that, that students typically drop at least a few points from the practice to the actual due to nerves or anxiety or a bad proctor or a tech issue, what have you, you probably want to aim even higher so that you got that buffer. So maybe you want to aim for a 175 or a 176 to get a 172, 173 if your target school's median was a 170. And if your undergraduate GPA is below their median GPA, then you also want to counteract that by having an even higher score. Not to say you can't get lucky, but why count on luck when you could just study more and actually get the higher score securely and remove the doubt? Now, I've got some questions here. Andre's like, free tutoring? I'm like, yes, actually, free tutoring. It's here in writing on the page, unpluggedprep.com/start. I want to help out as many folks as I can. Link in bio on Instagram, link in the description on YouTube. I want to help out as many folks as I can. So just feel free to book that call with me and we could talk through your situation. Got a question here from Danny. I'm back to studying after a year. My highest practice test was 160, back when Logic Games was still incorporated, parentheses, my weakest section. I'm aiming for next fall. I want 170 or above, jumping back in. Okay, so you had a 160 back when Logic Games was on the test, and that was your weakest section. Logic Games, of course, is no longer on the test. So maybe you're better than 160. Maybe you're scoring higher on the new format. And so my first thought is, the best way to jump back in is to jump back in. Take a practice test and see where you're at now post Logic Games. The new format is 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 reading comp, and then 1 unscored extra section of either reasoning or reading comp. So let's see where you're at today. You want a 170 or above? Maybe if we swap that old Logic Games for a new logical reasoning, maybe you're at 165 and you only need 5 more points. So my first thought is congratulations on the change. It's good news for you. So let's see where you're at and probably spend some more time on logical reasoning, because logical reasoning is 2/3 of the test. And so any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across the two sections. And Danny, if you could share when you're planning on taking the LSAT, that would also help me better advise you in terms of what our runway is. You said that you're aiming for next fall. I'm guessing you mean that you're aiming to apply next fall. So you've got a year, right? I mean, you could theoretically take the LSAT in June as your target test date 9 months from now. And then you would still have next August as a backup, and you still be able to apply the second applications open in the fall. So I'd say that you're in a pretty good position here relative to a lot of folks. We've just got to brush off the dust and the cobwebs and pick it back up. I usually would say for someone on a longer time frame, we spread out the studying with the personalized plan. So we look at, okay, well, we have the 3 overall major phases of accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type, assuming you've already got the lay of the land in terms of different sections, different question types. We've also got pacing, doing individual sections to work on your time management, how you allocate your time over the course of the section. And then we have endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests. And yes, you can schedule a session with me and I'll talk through your plan in more detail. Unpluggedprep.com/start. I want to meet with as many of you as I can. So Danny, Andre, anyone else watching this, I think it was Ashley before. Yeah, all of you can book calls with me and we'll talk through your situations in more detail. But if you've got 9 months, I'll just say this for everyone watching right now. I mean, you could break it up into 3 months on foundation and accuracy, 3 months on pacing, and 3 months on endurance. That could be your 9 months. And over the course of, what is that, 9 times 30, 270 days, you would be able to cover every exam released on Law Hub. You've got exams 101 to 158. You use 20 of those exams for foundational work and drilling, 20 of those for individual sections, and the last 20, or technically 18, for full-length exams. And you would cover the lion's share of what's on Law Hub. And even if you understood only 10 or 20 exams inside out, that'd be enough for you to get a top score. 170 is extremely doable. Now, Andre, who is like, yeah, free tutoring. I'm like, yeah, free tutoring, unpluggedprep.com/start. In terms of how to help you out, Andre, you said that you're taking in November. You're locked in right now. Awesome. We've got maybe 6-7 weeks between now and then. You said you've got double time, and that just opened up a different form of difficulty for the exam for some reason. What's RC advice? Okay, so double time on the exam. Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. Not all extra time is desirable, because the dark side of it is you get a much longer test day. The benefit is obvious. More time means you can look over things in more depth. You can slow down. You can take your sweet time, take a break, whatever. Give every question its due consideration. But it also makes test day really, really long. Even with standard timing, the exam is roughly 2.5 hours. With double time, you're looking at 70 minutes per section rather than only 35. And that works out to making it 5 hours. And if you get extra breaks, stop-start breaks, for example, unlimited stop-start breaks, it could be as long as you want it to be, right? So imagine if you had, rather than 2.5 hours, you have 5 hours plus breaks, ends up being 6 hours or 7 hours. That's a really long time. And speaking of long, I've got a surprise for you guys. I'm coming up next week when LSAT scores are released. I'm going to do a live stream for all of you watching this now. If you like my live streams, if you like me doing these Q&As, I'm going to continue doing them for as long as I can, of course. Not mean I'm going to be here all day today, but I'll do them every weekday. I'm available and I have some time on my calendar to carve out for you all. And when scores come out Wednesday, I know a lot of folks are going to be wondering about their next steps in terms of, I got my score back. What do I do? Is it good? Should I retake? Should I apply now? How should I study for a retake? And so next Wednesday at 9 a.m. or so Eastern time, I'm going to hop back on for a live stream, and I'm going to stay on for as long as I can that day. It's going to be a full day. I'm going to block it out for you all. I've got former admission officers coming on the stream. That's going to be a lot of fun, talking through some admissions things as well with them for you all. And so if you like long live streams and you like me and you like these Q&As, I'll be here for you all. And if you don't like long live streams and you don't like me, well, I'm not sure what you're doing here then, but you're free to leave if you want. But if you do like it, of course, please stick around and I'll be happy to help out as many folks as I can next week. But my point was really, I thought of that because I was like, when things are long. So this live stream is going to be long next week and test day is long when you've got double time. And so you've got to build up your endurance, Andres, to bring it back to you here. So you've got to build up your endurance. How many practice tests have you taken so far with double time? That's what I'm really curious about. How many full sittings of the 5-hour test day experience have you been through? Because a full practice test with just 2.5 hours is pretty grueling already. Am I right? Like your brain gets kind of fried after doing 2.5 hours of this. So imagine if you're doing 5 hours of this, how much more grueling that could be. You've got to build up your endurance is what I'm saying here. We typically recommend that you do 10 full exams under real world test day conditions so that test day itself is like just another run through. And when you've got double time, that becomes even more important. So you're saying you've taken 2, average score was a 158. Okay, and what's your goal for test day? I mean, what do you want to shoot for? What's the score that you would be absolutely thrilled to get on test day with your double time? Is there like, you want 165 plus? Okay, so we've got to raise you up 7 points. I mean, my first thought is, why don't you do a full exam every single week between now and the test in November and review it in depth? Can you carve out 5 hours each week for a full sitting? Maybe it's tougher on weekdays. I don't know if you're busy with work or school, but maybe on a weekend, like say on a Saturday morning from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. or 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. You eat some breakfast before, you eat some lunch after so that you're not too hungry or famished, but in a snack in the middle, of course. But I think you should do an exam a week to build up your endurance because 5 hours is a marathon. I mean, that's longer than Lord of the Rings director's cut extended, right? Like it's a long experience. And you get to eat popcorn during the movie too. On test day, you can't, except for during the break. And you want to keep your blood sugar high. So take some granola bars or something. And so you're working, so you can't do it during work, but do it on the weekend. Okay, cool. So yeah, do it on the weekend. Yeah, I think that's good. Like do a practice test on Saturday, then review it on Sunday. Do that every single weekend. And you'll be able to fit in 6 or 7 before test day. That's my biggest advice, is just get the reps in, get the exposure. Now, as for your question on reading comp, I mean, you said what's reading comp advice? I mean, can you help me out a little bit more here? Like, what's your biggest struggle with reading comp? Because I mean, I published like an hour and 10-minute long video a couple days ago that was basically just reading comp advice. And so I'd say, watch that to start with. If you want my general tips, I want to use these live stream Q&As for more personalized advice because you're here, right? I'm here, you're here. Let's like learn a bit more about your particular situation so the advice I give you will be more meaningful and actionable. I mean, are you taking notes? Are you highlighting? Are you underlining? How long are you spending between the passage and the questions? Like those are some of the things I want to know because there are some common mistakes students make around all of that. And then if we look at what you're doing, I can say, okay, this is good. This we should change, and then we can course correct. I mean, if you all want to know the biggest mistake I see with reading comp, it's taking too many notes. The students who do the best on reading comp mark very little or not at all because it takes time to write things down and it takes time to read things. And what you write down ends up oftentimes not even being that useful, strangely enough. I mean, it might feel good, it might feel meaningful or actionable to write down stuff or to move your pen or pencil along or to highlight stuff, but do you actually use all that information later? You might be surprised and find that you don't. And it also costs you time. That's the biggest thing I'm concerned about, is that you're investing time in taking notes and highlighting things, that may not even be that useful. And so I would want you to focus on the biggest areas or the biggest takeaways, like the biggest main points. What is the main point? What is the primary purpose? What is the author's opinion? If there's one central idea the author could leave you with, what would that be and why? And so for a student with a longer time frame, like Danny taking it maybe possibly like a 9 months or a year from now, I would say take the oldest 10-20 exams, read the passage, and just pre-phrase or predict the main idea. That's it. Jot it down in your own words, maybe a sentence or a fragment of a sentence, and then look for LSAT's articulation of the main idea in the main idea question. Pretty much every single reading comp passage has a general main idea or primary purpose question associated with it. So see if your pre-phrase matches up. See if you were accurate. As a drill, as an exercise with the oldest exams that you're not saving for full-length practice tests. On a shorter time frame, Andre, I would look at just how you're allocating time between the passage and the questions. I generally recommend spending roughly 2.5, 3 minutes max on your initial read of the passage so that you have adequate time for the questions associated with that passage. Because already, I mean, if you spend 3 minutes reading and you have 8 minutes and 45 seconds for the passage plus questions as a whole, that means you already have less than a minute to solve each of the 7 questions associated. Because 8:45 minus 3 is only 5:45, but you have 7 questions. So you don't really want to go too far below a minute a question. So I would look at time allocation. And I see you're asking, how do you review reading comp? Yeah, reading comp review, of course, is helpful. I'm glad it's helping. But I would also review your time allocation. So when you finish reading a passage, with all the note-taking or whatever you're doing, look at the clock, time yourself, and see how long you spent reading the passage. If you're spending 4, 5, 6 minutes, you're not going to have enough time to solve the questions associated. Now, as for the review process, I mean, it's not really any different for logical reasoning versus reading comp. The reading comp passage is like a massive logical reasoning stimulus. But rather than being, say, 50 to 75 words, it's 450 words, a lot longer, like maybe 7 to 10 times longer. So that's why people talk about a paragraph-centric approach, where we say, okay, there's 4 paragraphs. What's the main point of each paragraph, or what's the role of each paragraph? And so that's where you start looking for the thesis statement of the whole passage and the topic sentences of each paragraph. But more importantly, I would want you to focus on grouping the information in the passage by the role that it plays. You have viewpoints, which are opinions, theories, hypotheses, essentially conclusions. You have evidence, which is the details and the supporting examples. And you have the advocates, meaning who, if anyone, is promoting a particular position, like scientists or scholar A versus scholar B. So you look at the who, you look at the what, and you look at the support for the what. That's it. And so make sure that you are reading structurally. What is the role of each statement playing in the passage as a whole? Are you clear on that? And can you walk away from the passage being able to articulate in your own words the main idea? That's all you've got to do. And basically every single mistake in reading comprehension comes down to not knowing the main idea, not knowing what the author actually said. So the question becomes, do you understand the text? Just like in logical reasoning, do you understand, are you able to identify what was the conclusion of the argument? That's analogous to what is the main idea of the passage. Same deal. So it's the exact same approach. And so folks who have questions here in the live stream, please keep them coming. I'll get to as many of them as I can. I may have to sign off soon, but I'll probably take 1, maybe 2 more if they're quick before I've got to run. So again, open Q&A, anything at all, LSAT, law school admissions. Happy to help folks out. All right, Kevin, I've taken the LSAT twice and can't seem to break into the 170s. Have I hit my ceiling? Should I keep pushing or settle with where I'm at? January, taking it in January. Okay, so I mean, I definitely don't want you to settle. I mean, you're going from 164 to 172. That's an 8-point increase in 4 months. I mean, I don't see any reason to settle for it. I mean, maybe yet you've hit a wall or hit a plateau, but we've just got to change your approach ultimately, right? I mean, I'd be curious to know what you've tried so far, what's been your primary mode of study. Some people fall into the trap of only doing practice tests. Others do nothing but drilling questions. I find that earlier in my career, people were prone to just taking lots of practice tests because there were a lot more of them before they removed logic games. Until they removed them, there were 94 exams numbered 1 to 94. And so people would fall into this trap where they would just take test after test after test and measure themselves. And they would be happy or sad about those results and move on to the next. Other folks these days, because there's a lot of apps that make drilling easy, they'll just drill question after question, but they're not actually learning from their mistakes or learning from their process. And so, because the thing is, it's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under tested day conditions, considering the pacing factor and the endurance factor. And so if you could share with me, Kevin, I mean, what have you been doing, more drilling or doing more practice tests? And do you feel like maybe you're lacking in one category or the other? Because my first thought is, let's just do the thing that you know you should have been doing, but you've been neglecting. That's the missing piece, right? If we fill in that gap, that might be your big unlock. Drilling. Okay. Yeah. So exactly. So drilling is the problem here, right? You're drilling and drilling and drilling, which is good for when you're earlier in your prep. But now you may well be past that point where drilling is useful for you. And it could be that your practice tests aren't going the way that you want them to because you're not actually taking enough practice tests. Some of these programs, I'm not going to name names here, but a lot of them will schedule out practice tests at various intermediate points over the course of the program. Like they'll say maybe every 3 weeks, they'll schedule a practice test. And in the interim, it's a lot of webinars and drill sets and videos and such. But in my view, I mean, a practice test every 3 weeks probably just isn't frequent enough. You've probably got to do one every single week in order to get a sufficient number of reps in, because over the course of really till January, you have more like 3.5 months than 4. That might be, say, 14, 15 weeks. I'm just guessing here. But if it's something like that, even just doing one a week, you're going to hit 15 exams, which is a pretty good number of exams to do when you want to score 170 plus. But if you do less than half that number, it's not getting enough at-bats or exposures. So my first thought is, let's have you doing more practice tests so that you work on not only your pacing, but also your endurance as well, not just drilling questions in isolation. That's my first thought for you. So if I were to create a study plan for you, and we can actually talk through that live together if you'd like, at unpluggedprep.com/start, you could book a free call with me and we'll talk through this one-on-one and map out a plan of attack for you. That's an open offer to everybody, by the way. And everybody watching this now or later, you could book a free call with me one-on-one. We'll work through a logical reasoning question together. We'll talk through your time frame, where you're at now, and map out a plan to help you get to your goal. And so we could map out for you week by week, what should your plan look like? When do we work on drilling? When do we work on individual sections? And when do we work on endurance in the lead up to your test? And so that's what I would recommend, is do the thing you've been neglecting. At this point for you, it's probably doing more practice tests if that's what you've been missing, only doing a few of them. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. I got to run, but this was a pleasure. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you all next week.